Hello everyone, it's our last panel discussion of the day before we give the stage back to the politics. To know that you don't know, it's a great start in life and also in this panel. I won't pretend even to understand the implications and complications of artificial intelligence, and especially in regards to disinformation, but with us here are the people who do understand, our speakers. So Mihailo BACKOVIC, Managing Partner at B12 Consulting, Sophie Murphy-Byrne, Senior Policy Manager at Logically AI, and Tyler Williams, Director of Investigations at Graphika. Welcome once again to TBS Forum Montenegro. Now, you have 40 minutes to blow our minds, because we know that AI exists, and we know that disinformation kind of has something to do with it, but you are here to tell us exactly what and how. So let's divide our panel into three parts in the simplest of terms possible. Bad news first, for you to tell us what bad guys are doing already in this context. Then the good news, what can be done to fight it? What are the tools to fight it? Are they the same tools? And then the third part, it's changing so quickly. Are we able to actually wrap our heads around it and really know how to use it, and to use it ethically, and to fight against the ones that don't want to use it ethically? So keep your minds on the fact that we are in the Western Balkans, so please be as specific as you can. Maybe Western Balkan region isn't so different from the other parts of the world when this is concerned. And of course, we can talk about Russia and China in this regard. So bad news first, okay? Mihailo, you said in our preparation that the ability of bad actors to disseminate disinformation is exponentially increasing. Tell us more on the ways to do so and the consequences.
Okay, so since generative AI appeared, and by generative AI what we mean are algorithms like ChatGPT, and if you've used tools like BYRNE that can generate images and so on, they really ushered a new technological revolution. So we are really living in the middle of the next industrial revolution that's powered by AI.
We're living in the future.
Yes,
okay.
in a lot of ways, a very fast evolving future. And one of the concepts that AI brings into the sphere of disinformation is scalability. Mm-hmm. Okay, and what does this mean? So I'll give you a very concrete example. So by all means, I'm a very mediocre programmer, okay? But it took me less than a day to program an AI-powered Facebook bot. Okay, this bot is able to connect to Facebook. It's able to generate through AI a message with any instruction that I give it. It's supposed to get data from Facebook, and I can use this data to, for instance, look at a profile of a person and tailor a message to that particular person. All of that took me less than a day to develop, okay, to implement this little piece of software.
Highly intelligent bot.
Exactly. And so now to multiply that to 1,000, 10,000 instances is essentially trivial. It's just a matter of sheer financial resources. And my estimates are that, you know, per unit, it will cost you something like a few euros per day. Okay. So now you have this ability to really kind of exponentially grow your disinformation operations. Yeah. And the other thing that's very important is that the quality of content you can generate with AI is becoming very human-like. It's extremely difficult even nowadays to distinguish AI-generated content from human-generated content. I do this exercise a lot of times in events where I show people a bunch of images that are human-generated and AI-generated, and without an exception, people are not able to tell the difference. So just to finalize this point, why is all of this possible? To give you a bit more of a context. So there are several things. The first one is that the difference between AI today and a couple of years ago is that AI of today can really understand context. Okay, so for example, if I tell you a sentence that goes something like, I'm going to go to the bank and pick up some cash, and I tell you the sentence, I'm sitting on a river bank and watching the sunset. Algorithms from the past they struggle to distinguish the difference between the word bank in both sentences. Algorithms of today can do this. They can actually look at an image and understand the relationship, quote unquote, understand relationship between the objects and the image and so on, where before they could only detect them. So all of this is a lot more similar to the way people actually reason and think and create, and it's the main reason why the quality of the content that generated by AI is so much more human-like. And the other thing, and this is to me
There's another thing. I cannot even handle the
very
first thing, okay?
Sort of when I realized this, it was a huge revelation, is that AI can use tools. Okay, I'm going to repeat this. AI can use tools. It's literally one of the things we use to define intelligence.
Yeah.
Okay, so I can give my AI system access to, for instance, tools that communicate to databases, tools that scour the internet, tools that allow it to perform computations and so on. And AI can actually use these tools interchangeably and pass results from one to the other and so on. So these are incredibly sophisticated systems that we can use to generate content.
We are done.
And it can be, unfortunately, used for disinformation as well.
I really want to skip on the good news part, but let's just kind of pay closer attention to this one. Sophie, I will just keep you just for this question, because as Mihailo said, and Tyler in our preparation said also something terrifying, even more because it's true. Content doesn't need to be perfect, just good enough that a casual scroll or a quick glance leads a person to a desired conclusion. Now, from good enough to really convincing stuff like deep fake, it looks like anyone can do it. I don't know which part of these three is more terrifying.
I think it's collectively terrifying, and I think you only need to look at examples, for example, in May of this year, where there was the AI-generated image of the explosion at the Pentagon, which then caused real-world hysteria on stock markets, for example. And looking ahead to the amount of globally significant elections that are due to take place in 2024, I mean, that is child's play compared to the impact that AI-generated images, text, etc. is going to have in terms of what voters, the billions of them who are going to be going to the polls, including here in the Western Balkans, in North Macedonia, Moldova, Croatia, Serbia, etc., in terms of what they're going to be believing when they go into those polls. And so we recently, logically, conducted a report testing the capacity of, I think Mihailo already mentioned Midjourney. We certainly tested that alongside Stable Diffusion, DALL-E 2, etc., in terms of their propensity to generate images that would be associated with narratives that we would commonly be seen used around election disinformation. So to take the example of the UK, this would be a huge number of migrants arriving across the English Channel. Mm-hmm. This would be widespread civil unrest, crime on the streets, etc. And to answer in terms of what's most terrifying, from that study that we carried out, what alarmed us the most is that 85% of the prompts that we presented to these platforms were accepted with little to no content moderation at all. And so, exactly as you say, and as Mihailo said, this is something that can now, it's no longer a case of a $20 million effort from the Internet Research Agency of Russia conducting this a few years ago. This is now being done for less than $400 by someone in their bedroom, simply if they wish to. And so the democratization of these generative AI platforms, I think, is what causes a significant concern. And from our perspective, again, going back to the amount of elections that will be, I mean, this is the first time we're going to see the EU, the UK, and the US, not to mention all other countries who will be going to the polls in the same year. And what we think we're going to see in the next 6 to 9 months is a move away from ChatGPT to a kind of influence GPT. Mm-hmm. What I mean by that is that attempts to fully automate influence operations are going to mature and present critical pain points ahead of those electoral processes. Mm-hmm. And I think there are a number of initiatives, both from industry and otherwise, which are coming out in terms of watermarking or ways in which the human eye will be able to tell whether an image is AI generated or otherwise. But what is probably most alarming from our perspective is that there are no initiatives that can do this for text. Synthetic text remains beyond the realms of detection as far as technology has currently advanced. Mm. So it's an annoying collection of things that I think that we would be quite...
Yeah, it's much easier to recognize that there are 6 fingers in a picture than there are, synthetic text and words in the body of the text.
Absolutely.
Wow.
This is, I think, why, from our perspective, we tend to try and be content agnostic. And what we're really trying to do is focus on what are called TTPs, so the tactics, techniques, and procedures, the means by which bad actors are disseminating the content. So that instead of just trying to figure out, well, if this word is placed in front of another, how can we tell if that's AI generated or not? Look at the ways in which maybe there's a coordinated artificial messaging campaign which is pushing out that content among the multiple other TTPs that are available, which bad actors very much are employing.
Tyler, can we believe anything that we are seeing or reading or listening to? Could you tell us more about your case study for the event in Ukraine that you did?
Yeah, so currently you can believe some of what you see. I personally am very cynical and believe that we're rapidly approaching kind of a zero trust scenario with the widespread adoption of various models. As my colleagues mentioned, you know, content does not have to be perfect. Sophie mentioned the Pentagon photo. Like, I do this for a living. I looked at it, it looks fake. It doesn't stick out to people immediately if they don't see this or do this for a living. So what we did at Graphika, and I will stress that this was an internal test and did not go anywhere and did not make it to the open internet, we basically wanted to see if we could, and how quickly and how cheaply we could create a coordinated messaging campaign. So we took the root event of a potential nuclear power plant bombing in Ukraine. What we then did is built fake images, fake eyewitness accounts, a set of fake bios for fake social media accounts that we could create, and translated these in English, Ukrainian, and Russian. So we had native speakers of all three languages confirm that these all, you know, passed the native language test. This cost us $4 USD and took 15 minutes. So that is kind of my starting point for why I'm not particularly confident in our ability to be able to respond to the scale of this threat by, as Sophie mentioned, next year's pretty significant election calendar.
So it's not actually even a case of having enough money to do it or a large sum of money to do it. You can do it for $4.
Yeah.
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 No. Okay, no, now it's time for good news because I really need it. One good news that I'm hearing from all of this is if we cannot trust the content that we are hearing, seeing, and reading, then I don't have to worry about my news presenter job, losing it to the AI artificial kind of presenter, because people will come again to trust people. We will have to see a person in front of us to be able to know that the words coming out of their mouths are real, or if they're on television or TV, we have no idea if this is the real person or not, right?
In a way, yes.
Okay.
But I have to say I'm a bit more optimistic about the future than Tyler is in the sense, and I'll tell you why. So we have this very powerful technology, and it's the case with most powerful technologies that the potential for misuse is significant. Okay, but the same technology that's available to them is available to us.
Okay.
Okay, and we can exploit these same principles of scalability, low cost, efficiency to actually counter the misuse. Okay, so for instance, let's look at the basic process of fact checking today, right? It's incredibly inefficient and actually doesn't work. And the reason why it doesn't work is because misinformation dissipates much faster than we can actually fact check it. It takes, from what I understand, at best a full day for an analyst to check something. After one day, it's too late, okay? The news has already gone through, people have adopted it, and the fact that you issued a statement saying that that's true, it's inefficient. But nowadays, you could actually automate largely the fact-checking process, and you could have almost in real time a system which takes something and says, actually, this is false, it's false based on this, blah, 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 and you could automatically tag social media posts like this, you could automatically prevent them from dissipating and stuff like this. So
what about emotions? in this whole picture, because people love to hate, people love to be angry about something, love to blame. This is like the first three emotions that people respond to, and if they see an information and have this adrenaline rush, oh, now I have something to be mad about. What is the use if they hear after 24 hours or in these 24 hours, no, this was actually fake?
So the effect is very little. I mean, you have to stop it, you know, in its tracks. So and this is really where AI can help you. The other thing I think is super important is this concept of adaptability, right?
Okay.
AI gives you this extreme flexibility to do things, you know, in a very microscopic level, to adapt your tactics and so on. But again, we can use the same. And actually, I will use here a very good example of an experiment, so to speak, that we did with the Digital Forensic Center, which is the digital hub of the Atlantic Council in Montenegro last year. And the idea was the following. So it's a group of very talented, very intelligent young people who are trying to track disinformation campaigns in Montenegro, and of which there is, you know, a whole universe here. And it's a very, very difficult job that they were trying to do manually. So I talked to them and we tried to see if we can develop some set of flexible digital tools that could actually accelerate their ability to track and respond to disinformation. So we did an experiment where I sat for a week with a group of people who had zero technical background, mostly political science majors, so no coding background or anything, and we spent a week learning basic Python programming language and a bit of data analysis techniques and a bit of AI that can be injected into that. And it worked.
In a week?
In a week. We were able together to build these tools that later on helped them with the analysis of the data for the elections and so on. And to me, this is a proof of concept that we have this ability to quickly adapt to the technology, to quickly integrate it into the workflows. And this is really what gives me hope that we are able to respond. What we don't need is, you know, new technology. What we need is the right vision. That's, to me, the main thing.
Sophie, to what extent are we really using the counter-disinformation tools and visions like this to really protect the society or to build resilience within society?
I think there's always going to be room to do more. I think that the state of the information ecosystem that we currently find ourselves in proves that. And I mean, certainly there's quite a variety of tools which are available. So certainly from Logically's perspective, we conduct fact-checking operations, open source intelligence investigations, as well as having built our own AI-powered threat detection platform. And to pick up on what Mihailo was saying, I mean, I'm sure it's clear to everyone present, but when we talk about fact-checking, we're talking about a process of enlightenment, not a process of silencing. And certainly any fact-checker will tell you that it is never us who are taking the decisions that are made on certain platforms to restrict or label content. That power always will remain with the platforms. And what we're talking about here is a methodical process of determining the veracity of this content. And so really what we're trying to do is empower users as best we can with with accurate information that they need so as to be able to make sound decisions and to foster meaningful conversations. And there are some initiatives underway to try and really create more of a market for that. I would point to the EU Code of Practice on Disinformation, which we happen to be signatories to. And that has very specific commitments, which will soon become more legally binding under the Digital Services Act, which is currently under implementation. And what this requires platforms to do is to not only enter into agreements with fact-checking organizations, but to also ensure that these fact-checkers are fairly compensated. And so this, when it comes to the extent to which these tools are being used, it's never really going to be enough in the current state, but we do see, to give you a slight good answer, there are initiatives that are at play to try and encourage these to be taken more on board by the platforms.
So I see two problems or challenges here. I'm learning the diplomatic language. So first challenge, it seems that fighting disinformation costs much more money than just giving it out to the world, because you need to educate people, you need to invest in the new tools, you need to learn people how to use these tools. And the other problem is how much of a problem is the willingness or lack thereof of average consumer willingness to actually accept or to think about the information he is absorbing?
Absolutely. I think that's a really good point, because out of the arsenal of counter-disinformation tools that might be available, they are rendered useless unless the general public has the capacity for critical thinking which is needed. And so this is where media literacy initiatives come into it. We're heavily involved in this, again, not just through commitments under the EU Code of Practice on Disinformation, but generally in terms of what is needed in the public interest. So whether this is creating keyword search interventions for a platform when it comes to a series of elections being held in a country, that if a key word associated with a disinformation narrative is typed into a search bar, that there is a pop-up that comes up to link to authoritative sources, or generally to a guide on how to spot mis and disinformation online. These are just some of the kind of media literacy activities that are underway, but we would also participate in various others, including train the trainer programs, going into graduate students or students of any age across the world and try and really educate them, because it's also in the time that we find ourselves, we're no longer just talking about media literacy, we're talking about digital media literacy.
Yeah.
And it's frankly not at the level that we need. And so
because media literacy is not on the level that we need. So we have no platform to build up on.
No, and I mean, this is exactly what, as I said, this is exactly what's needed to actually make those counter-disinformation tools meaningful, because this is the only way that you're going to have all of these initiatives stick, is if you have a public that is able to be receptive to them. They need to have those critical thinking skills ready to go. They need to know what the key signs are to look out for, so that when you do have a fact-checking signage applied to a piece of content, or when an open source intelligence investigation is published, that this is all feeding into that same learning capacity of the general public to be more skeptical of what they are seeing online, to think about what the source is, where this is coming from.
Tyler, how to suppress disinformation on the technical and the social aspect?
Yeah, I think we've not danced around, but touched on this topic a little bit here, which is, we're attempting these technical approaches to fight this technical problem. It is a whole society problem. We heard yesterday at several panels about the kind of social incohesion and ethnic incohesion in the Western Balkans. Those are expanded threat surfaces which adversarial actors can take advantage of, right? So unless you build and strengthen trust in your democratic institutions, unless you build and strengthen media literacy programs, the trust in your external fact checker or your big social media platform labeling something fake news, if that foundational trust is not there to even believe the media literacy curriculum that you're given or that your child is given, our work is kind of in vain, which is a really kind of bleak thing to say, but I still think valid. I also think, we're talking a lot about entities which operate in the legal sphere of AI. And jailbroken models, which, unlike phones, jailbreak in this community just generally means, open source. These models already are shared widely online. They're already talked about widely online. There are instruction manuals for how to install your own, how to write your own malware. Like, these things are out there and available. So unless we also, we've talked about disinformation and the IO aspect of this, but this is really kind of a cybersecurity issue too. And unless we approach this like a legitimate cyber threat, like a phishing campaign, the IO and the cyber generally go hand in hand. I find it difficult to extract one from the other for this kind of work.
Yeah. It seems like it should be stopped in tracks in the beginning, as close to the source as possible, and try to stop it before it spreads. And then on the other hand, the same analogy applies to the society-wide solution. It looks like we have to start from kindergarten, right?
Yes.
With media literacy and with, because you are naming all these tools and and we can use them, but we have to have the will and the understanding, the consciousness, this is a problem. As you said, it's a security problem. It's maybe a weapon of the, not weapon of the future, we are already living it, and it already probably is used as a weapon on a large scale. So, Mihailo, what does it take, and what should be done to protect in some way or prepare the political system for the AI-driven disinformation?
So Sophie and Tyler actually already touched on a few very good points about education and about society and so on. I mean, AI is a tool in the hybrid warfare environment, and so there's no silver bullet solution. We have to approach it as a hybrid solution as well. So to me, the first thing is that we need to invest in the technology and the human capital. We need to make sure that we can use the same technology to build protective tools. Okay, and that part is actually the easiest thing, because AI in itself has created a barrier of entry to develop these tools, to customize them, both cheaper, more efficient, and really more accessible in every way. The other thing is we need to heavily invest in education, and in Montenegro this is particularly important because we have a systemic problem for decades now with very low functional literacy among our population, among our graduates, and internet should have been a wake-up point for us to restructure our education system from, you know, learning facts to really focusing on analytic thinking. I think the urgency for that now is even more severe. I think we really need to flip our education system upside down and rebuild it from scratch and eliminate everything that doesn't have to do with critical and analytic thinking. Also, we need to teach people these things, media literacy. We need to equip them with the tools to be able to say, okay, I'm looking at something, and I'm gonna verify if it's true or not. I'm gonna check other sources. I'm gonna learn to find patterns by myself, which will suggest that this is false, and so on. It's possible, but it takes work, and it has to become a part of the culture, and has to be driven from education from a very early age. The third thing is regulatory. We need some level of regulation on how AI can be used and how it cannot be used. This is very tricky because we want to prevent misuse, but we also don't want to inflict on freedom of speech or prevent, companies or members of society using AI in productive ways. The EU AI Act, I think, offers kind of a good starting point, but there's still a lot of work to be done there. I'll just finish by saying that, we mentioned a lot of challenges. A lot of these challenges are actually opportunities as well. Something that's important to understand is that most of what we're talking about in the context of the Western Balkans, but it's true in the US as much as it is in France and the rest of the world. And what's interesting is that probably for the first time in history, we're at the point where the entire world is at the same technological level. Okay, so we all have access to the same AI technology.
Good news. Okay? Western Balkans is part of the world at the same level as everyone else.
And that is a wonderful opportunity for the Western Balkans to become a leader in something. I mean, we have an enormous need for tools to help us track and prevent disinformation, and we have the opportunity to build these tools with the resources that we have and really take the lead in this field. And whether we'll take this opportunity remains to be seen, but it's there.
What are the sources of the biggest kind of disinformation campaigns and using this technology in a bad way, connected to the Western Balkans, but we are now focused on Russia and its war in Ukraine. We saw disinformation campaigns going on and stuff like this, but China cannot be left out of the picture. Are these two centers the key centers?
I mean, I can just quickly say I'm sure that Tyler will have more to add, but I mean, it's in terms of having a graph that says where does the vast majority of this content come out of, I think in terms of the real world impacts, it probably does make sense to attribute the biggest concern to Russia and China. I mean, certainly from our investigations, we will have noticed quite alarming behavior from Russian state-backed accounts or state-affiliated accounts, where you can literally see the narratives around Ukraine is a Nazi state, Ukraine is a terrorist state, Ukraine is a satanic state. You can see those narratives being turned on and off like a tap. based on what is happening geopolitically. So this obviously would have happened around the outbreak of the war in February 22. You would have seen it again in December 2022 when there was the announcement of a fresh US aid package for Ukraine. And then again on the one-year anniversary earlier this year. And so to see this very deliberate action of this tap turning on and off, I think that in its, and really it's quite extreme. You're seeing sometimes anywhere from 2,000 to 16,000 percentage increase in these contests. So this is not an insignificant tap when it's being turned on either. So I think from the perspective of what we see Russia doing, I would definitely be attributing a significant amount of concern.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, you covered Russia, so I'll go to China since we had a panel on that a little bit earlier. We recently conducted an investigation into, Taiwan's election landscape. We identified roughly 10 or 11 IO campaign leads. Can't comfortably attribute those to China, although they promoted pro-Chinese narratives. During this investigation, we noticed that a lot of these items were using AI-generated content. And so that includes voice, that includes impersonation campaigns of both DPP and opposition candidates. That included text. And all of this was, again, we talked earlier about the spread. None of it received too much traction. And Taiwanese media is generally aware of, the threat that China poses to its sovereignty, and often report these things pretty quickly. So they have a pretty robust fact-checking disinformation industry there already, and they do excellent work. But some of these were kind of novel approaches that we hadn't seen. And kind of the meta takeaway here is that these state actors appear to be willing to experiment with a range of commercially available products. So that might include anything from, creating your own custom avatars, all the way through, oh, this is a new mobile app available on iOS, and it has a, pretty poor-looking AI avatar, but I'm going to use that as my news anchor for this video and see where it goes. So we've seen it run the gamut. We saw earlier in 2023, Venezuela launched a YouTube video. They were using commercially available AI actors. This was fact-checked and called out by a Venezuelan fact-checking organization, Cazadores de Fake News. They do great work. But before that YouTube channel was taken down, some of those videos had 300, 400, 500,000 views. So it's about, we've talked about this, it's about expediency. It's about detecting the narratives and the content. It's about detecting the tools used to do this. But more importantly, it's about addressing your social, political, economic incohesion that allows these narratives to foster, and understanding the geopolitical messaging which these adversarial states are attempting to push. And my final point is that it's not all states. Because this is cheap, because it's easy, anybody can do this. And it's uncomfortable to talk about, but we should address, domestic use for, adversarial purposes. Sure, we'll go with that. Mm-hmm. We did identify one campaign that we attributed with high confidence using open source information to a guy living in New York. We couldn't link him to any state actor, but it was him. So that's kind of my takeaway here.
Yeah, you're right. We are when we think about bad guys, our minds go straight away to state actors and go straight away to Russia and China. What about the US? What about the US? Not on the good side of the spectrum. What about the internal use? What about the blossoming of disinformation campaigns inside the US alone? What to do about that?
I think all of the same answers exist. Yeah. I'm generally state agnostic when I approach this problem. I think, every state has their own nuances. That's fine. But like we talked about, social and political and economic incohesion here, we have that in the States. It's different, There's a different history, a different context, but it's there, it's exploitable, and if I were an adversarial actor, why would I not target that? That is the threat space.
Yeah. Are there any questions from the audience? We have 2 more minutes to the end of our panel. We have, yes, and 2 questions. 3 questions, okay?
Hi, Yasmin Mihailo. Very quick question. I believe it was Mihailo that talked extensively about the idea of education. And I really appreciated your focus on the notion of critical thinking. So as somebody who spends a lot of time in universities, I think one of the things that has gone categorically massively wrong, especially sort of in North America, but I think in Europe as well, is hyper-focus and tremendous resources devoted to STEM and virtually nothing to the social sciences and humanities. And I have to say, as somebody coming out of the social sciences and somebody who spends a lot of time with colleagues in the humanities, far and away the best work that I've seen in terms of countering the threat of disinformation, especially AI-generated disinformation, is coming out of those fields. It's not coming out of STEM. So I think it's really important, and I would like to hear your views further on how people who are working in sort of the AI field and STEM field, how can we incentivize folks like that to reach out to people in the humanities and social sciences and say, like, we need you to come in, we need to help deliver resources to you, because that's where the training has to happen. I mean, critical education, critical thinking is happening at that level. Thanks.
I will ask you for a quick answer. We don't have much time to go out of our frame, and we will still have a question from the ambassador. We cannot refuse her the question and the answer, so please just keep it very, very short.
So first, I completely agree with you. Part of the reason why this is happening is because there is sort of, from the economic side, a lot of need for STEM right now, for computer programmers and so on, so a lot of money is flowing in there. But traditionally, the education system everywhere in the world suffers from this segregation. STEM people don't talk to social sciences people because from one point, it's not unreasonable because the language is a bit different, right? And I think, to be perfectly honest, I think the answer to this is in some form of liberal arts education. Okay, so I think that we really need to focus not on training programmers or physicists or sociologists. We need to train well-rounded people. We need to force people who are computer science majors to take art courses, and we need to force people who are studying art to take physics.
Holistic approach to the education.
Exactly.
Can we have another question, please?
And thank you, Yasmin. Thank you.
Can we?
Thank you, Yasmin.
No? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Yasmin. Thank you to the panel. I'm sorry to have taken the last question of the
No,
session.
perfect.
I really want advice to policymakers, and actually, in the case of myself and several colleagues here from the international community, advice to us. Because
We can hear you, and we will.
I know, but
definitely,
okay.
yeah.
But we try to help. In the case of the United States, we're very active in the area of media literacy, in the area of supporting education and debunking and fact-checking. We were one of the major sponsors of the Digital Forensic Center, which was mentioned as the test bed for some of your early AI work. What are the advices you give to us? We want to be helpful. Policymakers here in the Western Balkans want to catch up with and stay ahead of the issue, because really it does affect the fundamental livelihood of the country and eventually the choice of future governments as the voters are confused, influenced, and potentially betrayed by artificial intelligence. So advice.
May I?
Yes,
Yeah.
sure. Sophie, yes.
To try and be as brief as possible in
Yeah.
terms of 2 pieces of advice. One would be, there are ways of regulating AI, because we don't disagree that regulation of this technology is needed, but there are ways of regulating it which don't impede innovation, and we really need that. We need to lean into this technology, because let's not forget that this technology is neutral. It's the use cases used by bad actors for malicious purposes which imply negative outcomes. And so in order to remain progressive, we have to accept that the genie is out of the bottle, lean into it, develop it in a responsible way for good, because I think Mihailo touched on it earlier, that there are a lot of ways in which this can actually help us. This can be on the side for good. He mentioned precision fact-checking, which could be an option in terms of scanning existing claims that have already been checked. And to give one last piece of advice, which we feel strongly about from the UK perspective, starting next month, the UK is going to introduce what's called a digital imprints regime. This is applied to very specific registered organizations with their electoral commission. If you are disseminating election material, it has to have an imprint. This means the contact details of who is disseminating it, who the source is, on whose behalf it's being disseminated. However, in some parts of the UK, namely Scotland, this is not a requirement only for registered organisations. This applies to anyone disseminating election material. And we would advocate for that to be spread, to be expanded to any actor, because what
To
this
add more
does,
responsibility.
it provides a safeguard.
Yeah.
It means that it facilitates that very critical thinking. This means that a member of the public is going to go, hey, this is missing information on what
Yeah.
I should be considering whether it's
Yeah.
trustworthy or not, and
Yeah.
then they will know.
Lakmuspapier. Okay, thanks so much for this panel. It was a great panel. Thank you so much for listening and being here.